I just walked into. But
Okay, we'd like to go ahead and open the Kaysville Planning Commission and like to welcome all of you here tonight. We'll start with the first thing on our agenda, and it's the approval of minutes for meetings January 25th, 2018 and February 8th, 2018.
I'll make a motion that we approve minutes from meetings January 25 and February 8, 2018.
second, aye.
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 Okay. Second thing on the agenda is final plat approval for Cityside Townhouse subdivision located at 265 North, 200 West, and 209 West, 300 North for JPL Construction.
About a year ago, we reviewed and approved a preliminary plat for this property. It's behind the post office, next to the what used to be called Wad Square, the property highlighted here. As mentioned, it's on a corner. They've now got things in order and requesting final plat approval. Preliminary plat was for a 12-lot townhome subdivision. This is essentially the preliminary plat. 3 units or 3 buildings of 4 units each. Final plat again has the same units in the same location. Common driveway in the back, open space around the perimeter. Each of the townhomes could be owned individually, so they're separated into individual ownership type platting. Means they could be sold. You could have 12 different owners there, and then, as I mentioned, common open space that would be maintained by the homeowners association. Again, this was a preliminary plat, was approved last spring. It's in RM zone, so it meets the zoning. Meets all the requirements for final plat. It's configured and it's according to the preliminary plat, so we're ready to recommend a final plat approval for the Cityside Townhome subdivision.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? We've got representatives here.
I remember this, and I remember that thought it was well suited for the area. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we see designs of materials and how it looks when you're looking at it, which I'm not seeing in this right here, right now. But
we reviewed that with the preliminary plat. Just generically, this was kind of the concept plan that they had. So, garage at the bottom and then 2 stories above.
Yeah. It's nice to see. Thank you for bringing that back up. I was just going to ask, are they stucco? What's the material?
You want to step up?
Do you want me up there?
Sure.
We have your photos. Yeah. I think we submitted a couple of photos.
Do you want to state your name? We know who you are, but
Jason Larson for
Thank
JPL
you.
Construction.
That one?
So was this in Layton, Michael? Yeah. This is just kind of to demonstrate the idea. I mean, not colors or anything. And it's not exactly right. That has a flat roof. We would have a pitched asphalt roof, but just kind of the style. This is a little bit better representation. We'll do masonry and some siding. Maybe around the back there might be a little bit of stucco.
Okay, thank you.
So remind me with this, is this, I mean, it has been about a year ago, so are we looking at, are these going to be rentals or are these going to be purchased townhomes?
Well, we've developed it so that they're purchasable.
Okay.
And we're just keeping our options open right now.
So you don't know right now, essentially moving forward? Well, I mean, they could be either.
We can go either
essentially.
way.
Okay, all right, okay.
Kind of depends on what the market, like if you have buyers.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm curious about color choosing. I mean, do you just go with what people like if you have possible interested buyers, or how do you choose your colors?
that can kind of open up a can of worms, if you've got 12 different buyers right in
Yeah.
in a little project.
Yeah.
We haven't made that decision.
Okay.
That's further on.
Okay.
So I don't know how to address that.
So you're not sure how you'll choose your colors, you'll just...
I won't choose them. That's what I know.
I'm curious about who will choose these colors. Because interestingly, some colors are great for now, and then sometimes they look terrible 20 years from now. You know what I mean? And I think it's hard to choose colors. That's why I asked.
I think that's hard too. That's why I won't do it.
Yeah. The masonry is nice, though. It'll help, I think, to have that on the facade.
Just by way of reminder, because this is open space type subdivision, we did review it for the PRUD overlay zone, and that's where we reviewed the structures and the looks and that kind of stuff. So we have reviewed that. It is on record.
Right.
So you set a little bit of standard for them when you allowed the PRUD zone to be applied here.
Okay.
You ready for a motion?
Sure.
I'll move that we grant final plat for Cityside Townhome Subdivision for JPL Construction at approximately 265 North, 200 West, and 209 West, 300 North, Kaysville.
Second it.
Aye.
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 Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item is a public hearing and amendment of Section 19.117, definitions of Chapter 19.1, general provisions of Title 19 subdivisions.
We try to give you the longest titles possible.
I know, I
These,
just
right?
stopped. Good job.
This is a public hearing. Not a lot of public, but if they, after hearing my 2 cents worth, want to share any comments, we just want to remind the commission to give that opportunity. We've discussed previously, again, we've been looking at a lot of ordinances lately, but most of them have been previously discussed. This specific one, so your staff report, I just put a couple paragraphs on the same page relating to 2 different ordinances. So item number 1 is regarding this specific section where we've heard from the Planning Commission and the council occasionally when we bring in essentially 2 neighbors that want to move their fence line and they come before you, they have to get the plat approved, or there's the occasion where somebody has 2 lots, they want to build a bigger home or put their shed on it in a different way, so they'll combine those into one property. And so we have heard comments previously of why do we need to see these kind of items, and Andy and I, and as a staff, we've talked about these processes. There are a lot of options that the state statute allows as to how to handle it. So any number of jurisdictions do it in different ways. We still very much like to ultimately get to a subdivision plat as far as the final product and documentation that, shows and makes legitimate the process of switching those lines, whether you're eliminating one or just adjusting the one. So this talks to that. It just leaves it in the hands of staff. So ultimately staff would come in, somebody would show us a plat. We'll go through a process internally looking for the same things that the Planning Commission does, make sure there are no illegal setbacks, lot sizes, and such created with the process. We would then have them create a plat and get it recorded, but skip the whole public process only for these types of items. So that's what this is addressing. Again, the public hearing's there, so if you'd like to open it up to that, and then I'd, again, be happy to speak with the commission regarding it and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing to discuss that long one, Ordinance 19.17. If anyone would like to talk on it? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
So we're taking them one at a time, right?
One at a time.
And the one that's where it's just a lot line adjustment,
Correct.
that seems
Pretty straightforward.
really easy.
Yeah. There's no issue with that.
We've had too
at all.
many come before us
Yeah.
that pretty much you've done it.
Yeah.
So do you want a motion?
Sure.
So we're recommending, recommending to the council that they make this change?
Correct.
Okay. Just trying to decide if I want to read that whole thing. I move we recommend that we change the ordinance, what is it, 19.1, 19.2.7?
3 on the agenda.
Lot line adjustment process.
That'll work.
Here, I second that.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Good. So we'll take the second one.
Okay, and so this covers a couple different sections of the ordinance. These would be relating to the subdivision process that you would continue to see. So again, the last one, if somebody was combining lots, reducing the number of homes that could be built, or just keeping it the same with a different line, we'll deal with it staff. But the Planning Commission will still see preliminary plat on anything else where somebody's creating new lots to create new homes or new buildable lots within the city. We've discussed this previously. The conversation was the Planning Commission would review those and continue to give recommendation at the preliminary plat phase because there is some, at least more discretion at that stage than there's at the final plat review. So the City Council will remain the decision-making body on a preliminary plat. But we've heard, again, some comments. League of Cities and Towns and APA trainings and so forth, they've been talking a lot lately about legislative decisions, administrative decisions. You saw some of those in the trainings we did recently. The final plat in particular is very much an administrative decision. And so as we've discussed, I think the council representative has talked about maybe pulling that off the council's plate to negate the probability of a legislative body making an inappropriate decision on an administrative action. So I believe the discussion, and hopefully this appropriately reflects what we did with the Planning Commission level, was again, let them be the final body for the preliminary, but that the Planning Commission would feel comfortable being a final approval body for the final plat. And again, for those listening or the audience, it's difference being the final plat, as we just saw, is very much a technical, does it look and feel like the original preliminary plat, and in large part is engineering been completed to show that it's going to function according to the city standards. So that's part one of this very long paragraph and the items in your ordinance. Part two, still relating to subdivisions, as we talked about that process. A couple years back, we adopted the Kaysville City Active Transportation Plan. And so the last page of the actual ordinance itself would be to implement a new subsection in there, number 11, regarding active transportation improvements. And so typically, as the Commission's very familiar, when a subdivider or developer comes into town, they're required to put in improvements. So developers build cities, cities don't build cities is kind of the concept, right? So they build their roads, curb, gutter, sidewalk, utilities, all as part of their approval. And this is saying now we could require that they be responsible for the installation of active transportation improvements, off-street trails, when applicable to those developments. I think that about covers it. So if there are any questions, again, I'm happy to take those and just remind the Commission of the public hearing. Thank you.
Any questions before we open
No.
public hearing? Let's go ahead and do that. We'll open the public hearing. Okay, thank you. We'll close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
I could not be happier because the active transportation plan just codifies it, right?
What this really does is it gives us authority to enforce those elements onto
Yes.
a developer to install them.
Yes.
We adopted it a year or so ago, and development comes in and you ask, well, our plan says put a trail here. I didn't have the authority to require that, or we as a city didn't have that authority. So this gives us that authority to require them to meet the elements that that plan calls for.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
So just from my understanding on this then, so this is two parts essentially. One part being essentially giving the Planning Commission the final say on final plat approval, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then secondly, obviously we collectively as a city have spent an exhaustive amount of time on the active transportation plan, and we essentially would incorporate that into the ordinance and force developers to meet that plan, or to incorporate facets of that into their developments and things like that.
That's correct.
Okay. I don't have any issues with either. So
I had one question, and maybe it's just that I didn't see it. On number 8, it does say the city council will meet and review the plat, and then it goes on, the subdivider agent must meet with the council. My question being, because then on 16 it says the planning commission will meet and review the final plat and take action. I wondered if in number 8 the council would make a recommendation, or is just the fact that it passes and comes back to the planning means that they have kind of approved it? It was number...
Yeah, just reading through the process here, and that's a great comment, because it's highly probable that some of that language gets missed over as we're just scratching it. So the first few sections, I think, talk specifically to the preliminary plat process. So 1 through about 12 or something, 8 or 9. And then it takes place over again, almost verbatim, but then it talks about the final plat step. So I think number 8 is talking about the review of the city council on the preliminary plat review itself. Right. And so we would continue that practice where they would still have to see the preliminary as a legislative body.
Right. No, I understand that they would still review it. I just wondered if they would, before it came back to us, if they'd say, we think it looks great, we approve it, take it back to the planning commission.
If the city council were to deny the preliminary plat, then it would have to start over again back with you.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you.
I guess, would there be even if it's like a hotly contested, barely passes kind of thing on the preliminary plat, once it's approved, whether or not the city council was mixed or whether it was controversial, doesn't matter. If it's approved as a preliminary plat, then when it's before us, final plat, we basically have to approve it if it's in line with the preliminary plat, right?
That's correct.
right.
And we've seen some of that with whether it's the planning commission or the city council as well. Once it reaches that step in the process, the applicant's vested to a certain point and has a certain expectation. So if they've met those expectations, whether it's the planning commission, council, or staff, there's certain obligations to approve those. So it is just the verification of those specific steps.
Okay.
So most recently, when we looked at the new development that's going to occur on Angel, we got another chance at it, right, where we could bring up the concern. It had the public hearing in the past, and then
you'll see the final plat on one like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing this does, we'll probably be seeing an ordinance on this come soon, is it will make the city council the appeal body for subdivision plat approval. So one like that, or some of these others where there's been some controversy, if they think you missed something, they can appeal it, and it can go to the city council, who will then perform the appeal authority. So,
and that's a
it
great.
would be very simple
change.
if it was a controversial one to appeal the planning commission's administrative decision. That doesn't make it easy for the council to overturn your role, because if they've met the criteria, it's an administrative decision, and it generically has to be approved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was a good solution to that dilemma.
Good. Well, I appreciate you putting all the different recommendations, but I'm glad that we were in agreement, so you listed those.
So how do we go, so you want a motion on this one as well then, correct?
If you're comfortable with that procedure.
Is this
I
one
mean,
motion
I
for both?
am, yeah.
Well, If
So-
you don't like some part of it,
Right, but it can be one motion for both because it's in the same.
you already made a motion, this is all listed as one item.
Yeah.
It is, oh, so we're good then.
Yes, so everything listed under here could be done with one motion. If there's reason to change anything,
No,
then
so
let
we're
us know.
good, okay,
So we're done?
all right, we're good.
Okay.
All right.
So you want a motion?
I, yeah.
Oh, so do we need to make this whole expansion, so do,
I'll
Can I-
move.
can I
go
do
ahead.
it?
No.
I would love to do this one.
Okay.
You can just
I
say item
move-
4 on the agenda.
Yes, I move that we recommend approval of number 4 on the agenda to our city council.
that's,
We'll make it look
second.
good in the minutes.
You're speechless. Aye.
That's rare, I know.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Okay.
Good job, Anne-Marie.
All right.
You'll take care of the rest of it.
We're going to discuss flag lots. I mean, that's not a question. We are going to discuss flag.
I love flag lots. What are we talking about with those?
Yeah, we can spend as,
Especially on the end of a cul-de-sac, that makes it even better.
we've brought it up a few times,
Henry, are
and
you
we're
getting
missing a
that
good
tone?
chunk of the planning commission. But we essentially left it off last time with, personally, and I think for the commission, with a number of questions. And so we brought the in-house expert from the previous process and engineering who understands some of our utility questions and so forth. I figured it might just be a good chance to ask, why are they good or bad, or what were some of the reasons that they were taken off in the first place. So you'll notice it's not on necessarily as an action item. I know a commissioner's got some conflicts with scheduling, so we could take as little or as much time up till before 8 o'clock to discuss what you think is appropriate this evening. So I had mentioned to Andy that at least some of the questions we had with the cul-de-sacs, and again, I'm repeating a little bit of what I just barely said, but there was an infill committee that had met years back to look at the different ways the city was developing. Now that there's a little bit less and less greenfield, and things are changing and how we're seeing impact coming on from infill type development, who ultimately gave the recommendation to first the Planning Commission and then the City Council at the time to no longer allow cul-de-sacs on the end of, no longer allow flag lots on the end of a cul-de-sac street. And so maybe some of the history on that, Andy, I don't know if you getting put on the spot here as to some of their thoughts as why that was better development than what was allowed previously. And then I thought you'd probably have some expertise on the utility considerations at 600 feet. Problematic if you go beyond that and stretch to a deep flag lot for water services and so forth, and our emergency services. And perhaps if we could just have a little conversation on that, and if other questions come, then we'll take those. If that it gives the Planning Commission a direction that it's not worth talking about anymore, that's great. Or if you want to continue the conversation, then we'll know to continue bringing it up on a future meeting to make a formal recommendation. So of note, the specific case that brought this up off of Bear Creek Circle, if I'm getting the street right, that has a rezone application in for our next meeting, I believe, the first meeting in March. And part of the reason for that is it was a different way to likely accommodate what they hope to do without necessarily having to do with the flag lot type scenario. So we'll discuss that at a different meeting. But I think it's worth noting that it's not necessarily, not that we ever do, but pertinent that we consider this just for that one item, because there are, again, other ways that property could be developed, and we'll take a look at that. So take it away, city engineer.
Yeah, as Lyle said, it's probably 10 years ago, we were getting infill development, especially here on the east side of town, just east of City Hall in the square blocks. You get the little home out front and a big lot in the back. People get old, they don't necessarily want that much yard anymore. So we were getting that, so the City Council designated, they formed a committee. We met half a dozen times and reviewed various ordinances regarding infill type development. And flag lots was one that was on the list. As some of you have mentioned, flag lots aren't always the most desirable way to develop land. The infill committee, though, recognized that there probably needs to be provisions for it because there's some property that there's really no other practical way to develop it and make use of the property. So they determined we should continue to allow flag lots. That's the choice, is to just not allow them anymore. They do serve a purpose in certain circumstances, but they wanted to reduce the flexibility of them somewhat to make them less
Common?
Less common, yeah. They felt like a flag lot off the end of a cul-de-sac was, in a sense, double dipping. So, Lyle pulled up, this is the one that's in question. There's a lot here that's technically all one lot. They built the house clear at the back. Now they don't want to maintain all that front yard anymore. They want to sell off a flag lot in front of this house. Well, from a utility side, it doesn't change anything. It puts the house closer. So they're arguing, well, why can't we build a flag lot here? The house is already that far away. Well, the ordinance doesn't allow it. You look over here, you see a cul-de-sac, and you see a couple flag lots on the end of it. That was approved before the ordinance was changed. So from utility side, 600 is somewhat of a arbitrary number. You can go to other cities, you'll see anywhere from 500 to 1,000, 1,500 feet. Some do it based on the number of homes that the cul-de-sac serves. You need to have a limit somewhere. 600 has been in effect since before I started working here. I don't know the basis of it, but it's a good number. We've been using it a long time. It seems to work okay. So some of the concerns are you come back 600 feet on a cul-de-sac. This was a full 600 feet. And then you run a 200-foot long flag stem to the cul-de-sac lot. Now we've essentially got a house 800 feet away from any connecting road. We don't particularly like long dead-end water lines because that's where contamination builds up. We have to test our water system regularly. If water has good circulation and is moving and being used, it stays fresh better than if it's going in a pipe and sitting there and, one toilet on the end of a cul-de-sac flushing it. The flag lot on the end of the cul-de-sac doesn't hinder a whole bunch because that's just that home's water. So, if one of these guys with a 200-foot service lateral went on vacation for a week, I'd run my tap for 15 minutes before I drank a lot of water just because everything sits in there and the bacteria have the chance to grow and that kind of stuff. So, as we discussed with the subdivision a few weeks ago, cul-de-sacs aren't always the most desirable development plan either. And so the feeling is kind of adding a flag lot to the end of it maybe just extenuates the bad, not the good of a cul-de-sac. So there's a couple things to consider. One, another item, I guess, especially if you look at this one up here, you got a driveway here, a driveway there, a driveway there, a driveway there, and a driveway there, and a driveway there. You got 6 driveways off the end of that circle. That means you barely have room for mailboxes. And if you plow the snow, you're almost invariably going to put snow in front of a mailbox or a driveway.
Yeah.
So if you have standard lots on a cul-de-sac, and you look at this one, there's a lot more space for mailboxes, snow piles, and those kind of things, garbage cans. I don't even know.
Fire hydrants, too. We have one of those in our cul-de-sac, and it eliminates even more parking.
So,
yeah.
Those are kind of the issues that are out there. I kind of believe that taking a trying to see a different cul-de-sac. A flag lot off the stem of a cul-de-sac doesn't have near the impact as it does coming off the bulb or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I think what Lyle's kind of tentatively written up is saying, okay, you can have a flag lot, but the length to the home still can't exceed the 600 feet or some other dimension. So it kind of stays within the bounds of what we have. You get the argument, okay, I've only got a 200-foot cul-de-sac. Can I put a 200-foot flag lot off the end of that one? That goes back to the other issues, but it addresses some of them. So those are some of the issues that we see on it. We tried to make the cul-de-sac stem wide enough that not every lot could do it. You know, it's a 30-foot stem. So in a typical subdivision, even with a 100-foot lot, there's not very many homes that have a 30 plus a side yard, a 38-foot side yard that could provide a flag lot. So it's never going to be done everywhere under the current provisions, but we've had 2 or 3 people that are on cul-de-sacs that have asked, you know, even just, well, these people had a different issue, but they're on flag lots there, and they're trying to figure out how they can now split their flag lot to build other homes on their properties. So,
Oh, wow.
those are both, I think they're both 2 acres. And now they want to further develop it. Their options are a little bit limited. It doesn't relate to cul-de-sac per se, but so we've had a few inquiries about how to do it. There was another one somewhere else. I don't remember where that one was. But those are the issues. We've been requested to discuss it, so that's what we're here for.
I'm curious, the one you just barely pointed out, would the dimensions work for a double flag lot on that one?
Well,
The stem and then...
technically this one does, because at the time this was built, this property back here wasn't developed yet. And this actually was a road that went through down to either Shepherd or Sunset. It actually continued. Well, Sunset went across here, is what it did. So it tied in. So in the city planning, we visualized a road continuing up to service this property. So this is a bigger flag stem than a normal, so they could do a double flag. This one is not. It's just standard 30 feet. They're a little bit locked under current ordinances.
Yeah, thank you.
So is it safe to say, I mean, I guess it is safe to say, that properties like this are pretty far and few between throughout Kaysville? Is that?
Generically, yes.
I mean, that's a generalized statement. So I guess my concern with this is, and leaving all bias aside with this, my concern is going in and changing ordinance and setting precedents. Can these be handled on a case-by-case basis kind of a thing? I mean, is this something that we can do? Because obviously this stuff isn't coming up, you know, every 2 weeks or every month or anything before you guys. So, you know, can this be handled through city staff instead of going in and rewriting code and ordinance and handling it on that kind of a platform?
Right now, a flag lot requires the PRUD overlay zone, which is a legislative decision.
Okay.
So you could deny any PRUD overlay zone request with little to no reason.
Right.
It's better if you have a reason, but you can say, no, I don't like this. This isn't appropriate in this area. We're not granting that zone. Therefore, you can't do the flag lot.
You can't do that, period, end of story, done.
Whatever, yeah.
Right. So what we're doing here, though, is we would be creating a mechanism, essentially, that would usurp that, and the applicant could just say then, well, your city code says that we can do this, so we're just
Right now,
gonna
our
do
code
it.
specifically prohibits
This request.
flag lot on a cul-de-sac street.
Right.
So, and
But we're not looking to change that, though, right?
Well, that's
the
the
question.
Well, I guess
I
that's
guess.
the whole
Somebody's
conversation
looking
here,
to.
I guess, right.
So
Okay.
if you like it the way it is, that's fine. We'll just say, we asked them and they said no.
Right.
More to what you were alluding to is if we took that out of the current ordinance and made it strictly discretionary on you, that could be done as well.
Okay. All right. Fabulous.
When you see it up like that, you wonder if you could just limit how many could be around, like we do the duplexes and all of that, within 500 feet. I don't, but that's
Well, again,
true.
I mean, I think that this is a pretty unique, I mean, that's Centennial, right? Yeah.
Endeavor Elementary, right there.
What's the school?
It's elementary.
Oh, okay.
Endeavor.
Sorry, okay, my bad. Oh, because, right, that's Shepherd coming down here. Okay. But, I mean, we've seen this particular map, or this plat, a handful of times, and I mean, is there any other place in Kaysville that has this high of a density of these flag lot cul-de-sac flag lots? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, I see.
Yeah, this situation appears pretty unique.
Right.
I don't know off the top of my head of any others, but
They're
it's possible there's some.
randomly scattered.
Randomly scattered.
You had mentioned on the Blooming, I think you meant Blooming Grove when you said Bear Creek.
I said
but is that, so what's the change that they're going to try to do that would eliminate the need for this?
I think they'd still prefer the flag lot,
Right.
assuming it's desirable, but they have enough frontage where they could do 2 standard lots. It would just look like a really fat flag stem, I guess, going back. And so right now it's an A1 zone, which requires at least 100 feet of lot frontage.
Oh.
If they go to an R1 type zoning, an R120, an R1LD, then it's only 90 feet of frontage requirement. So that mitigates that a little bit.
And do they own that third parcel on the side?
Yes.
That little skinny
This
one?
little skinny.
So the frontage would go from here around to here somewhere.
How in the hell are they getting back to that house? Is
There's
it
a
right
driveway.
there?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a big long road.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a funny scenario where they can create, if they get the 90 feet of frontage,
Back
at least 30 feet back, then they can narrow their lot to follow the.
And if they just
So it ends up having a funny kind of front yard spot right up against the circle just to meet ordinance. And
Yeah.
but yeah, if the flag lot scenario is not a desirable way to go at the cul-de-sac, then they do have options at least, but it's less preferable for them.
I'd be interested to get Gary and Josh and Tom's take on this, too. I don't want to mute their voices because they can't show up, but they couldn't be here this evening, so.
Seems like to me if we say you can have 600, you can have a flag lot, a cul-de-sac 600 feet deep from the intersection, is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Maybe.
Then having, there's not much difference between that and having, like you said, a 300-foot cul-de-sac and then a 300-foot flag lot. It's still that 600-foot maximum. So I don't.
That driveway? I mean, that driveway that's easily a football field or more. I mean, that's 300 plus feet, right?
You're probably close, 300, give or take. I think that cul-de-sac is in that ballpark, 300 and 300, so.
But he's not a flag lot yet because he has all that frontage, so he's
Oh,
normal.
right, okay.
but that's what they're asking to do, and that's what it would create.
Right, okay, I see.
And so in this scenario, where do you know where 600 feet is, and you don't go how the crow flies, right? You go on the road.
Yeah,
As
travel
the fire
distance.
truck drives.
Yeah.
So bang, bang,
Yeah.
bang.
So is that 600 feet? Do we know?
We could find out. I don't know if you want to try to do it now, or we can prepare that for next time.
I can't do it right now, but
If
Yeah,
I'm
don't ruin it
guessing,
now. We
it's
can
very
save it
close
for
to that
later.
driveway. Andy he'll do it here real quick, so we can.
But this problem, I mean, this problem comes from the idea that when they did the initial planning, they were drawing these big, huge lots, right? And then now, as time goes on, as people age, as people move, as land becomes more valuable, people don't want to have the big lots, right? And so that's the problem, is we're creating huge lots a long time ago, and then now we're trying to divide that up and use that land more
Right.
than was originally planned.
Right.
And so as I drive through Kaysville, I feel like there's a lot of streets that are just, it's windy and lots of turns and lots, it's just, we're really far away from the grid of Brigham Young.
Sometimes topography requires that, especially kind of over in that area, right? There's valleys and little hollows, some over there.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's nice when it's a little more flowy.
Yeah, you get extremely rigid, then it's like San Francisco and whatever that street is that looks like a Z going up it, right? And because they just built the grid right over top of everything. And
But again, though,
you get too
properties
rigid.
like this, again, I mean, not to play devil's advocate here, but again, properties like this and this area in general are outliers in Kaysville. I mean, Christ,
There's some
but
pretty
you look at
unique
West
examples.
Kaysville, I mean, it's as flat as, I mean,
This is West Kaysville.
Well, okay, but, all right, I mean like, west. So, but, I mean, I get it,
but there are hills there, but I think
There are
the problem
hollows and
is
hills.
that this is long, 20 years ago, this was, the nature of this land is that it's all agricultural and there's 3 and 4 acre lots everywhere.
Sure,
And now,
right, and all that's changed now.
Now, no one,
that's gone.
that's the exception to the rule, and we're trying to figure out how to allow this infill development.
Right. So what did we find out for our measurement? What are we looking at?
Let's say that again.
Did you find the measurement on that?
Yeah, it's about 350 on the cul-de-sac and about the same back to the home,
So 700 feet?
roughly.
So 600 wouldn't work for them anyway.
No.
May not. But again,
Where do you go, like to the driveway? Or, I mean, how far in do you go to the?
well, I measured from here, well, actually, he might be very close.
But the irony here is that
Come
that
there,
house is
from
already,
there and to-
whatever damage we do by having
about
too long
700.
a space from the intersection, that's already in, right? I mean, they're already getting service.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what makes this one pretty unique is, they're already the deep house on there, right? And when you consider the cul-de-sac too, the road may be 600 feet long to this point. And the house typically has a 30-foot front yard setback, but they may be a little bit deeper than that. So, but you're probably at least 630 feet before you get to the home, where this was 700. So it's a little bit closer. Not too many people build farther back than the minimum front setback, but it does happen. So
I'm just curious whether our other audience members, or do you live in this area? No? Okay. I wondered whether you were here for that.
They're getting merit badges.
We just have fans, that's,
For example, they'll look at this lot here.
yeah.
What are you going to ever do with this property?
And the frontage is too narrow for even a flag lot
Frontage
on
is
that,
too
right?
narrow for a flag lot.
Yeah.
Right.
But even if the frontage was adequate, is that better than this? I don't know.
Maybe landowners need to get together and get creative.
Yeah.
Or
So-
just face the fact that you're not going to be able to build on every single
that's-
parcel that's in the city, so.
That's an option as well. It's
Right.
very viable, yeah.
Right. Sorry, you can't build here.
Would you mind repeating this again when we have a full commission?
No, that's fine. We understood that.
That would be great.
Just
'cause
some-
I think they'd all be interested in this.
Some of my initial thoughts are that we're certainly not restricting that particular homeowner's ability to develop, even if we don't change it for him, or her.
Well, even if we do change it, it's probably not going to help them because they're more than 600 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
They're close to 700 feet.
We shouldn't change an ordinance
Right.
just to make sure it meets one particular
Exactly.
Well, no,
circumstance.
but that was my whole point. I mean, why the hell are we changing the ordinance for a handful of people? When that's not
But
logical.
if
That doesn't
there's a
make
need to
sense.
change the ordinance, you don't want to craft it to accommodate just this one. You have to recognize it's going to apply universally across the city. So you want to make the ordinance that's correct for the city, not for this individual.
Right.
Not for,
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around one of the options that you shared with us, Andy, that it wouldn't even, those two things you said, do you know what I'm talking about? Oh gosh.
Discretionary.
Yes,
Something you talked about.
that's it.
So we
State it
could put
again.
together something like that because, yeah, currently because of the PRUD, there's some discretion to a flag lot always. But because the separate section of the ordinance says they cannot be on cul-de-sac streets, your only option is to say no in this type of scenario.
Okay, yeah, that's
We
it.
could craft something that eliminates that would then give you the option to say yes or no.
I got it. So yeah, do we like that it's kind of restrictive? Do we think it's good that it's restrictive, right?
I'm gathering at the very least, we don't want to just make it a, yes, you can always do it if you meet these standards. There's got to be at least some discretion.
right, some discretion.
Whether we even go that far would probably be based on other measurements and different things if we allow them at all still, so.
If we changed it to allow a maximum of 600 feet, but it can be either, but some amount of that footage could go towards the flag lot and some of it could go towards the cul-de-sac, we still have the PRUD
Discretion.
venue that allows us to say this is not good
Right.
in this situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's
we hold
what
that
that's what I would that's what I would say we should do.
Yeah.
Is allow 600 feet, however it's broken out between cul-de-sac and flag lot, and then maintain the PRUD scenario where we still have discretion as to whether it makes sense in this particular circumstance.
That makes sense to me as well. In this case, too, I mean, it's just good to envision scenarios where it's a problem. We don't see the problem so much here because there's not already all those driveways coming off the bulb, right?
Right.
And it's different from the other one that you used as an example so that we could picture. I'm in the bulb of a cul-de-sac, and we don't have any flags off of this cul-de-sac, and it's tricky.
It can get crowded.
It is crowded. Yeah, there's very few places to park on the curb because of driveways and the fire hydrant.
Right.
And it's not a large circle, it's probably just standard that was required for our particular area. And it's traffic can be dangerous for young kids that live in the cul-de-sac. That's why I talked so much about the sidewalks around that other one off of Angel that we were looking at. Or was it Angel? Closer to the junior high. Because we have kind of near accidents pretty regularly because there's a musical business that brings traffic into our cul-de-sac 3 out of 5 weekdays. So anyway, those are just thoughts of cul-de-sac life, that it is certainly something to really look at.
Just question real quick. Would you like us to put in, sometimes this is beneficial, still leave discretion to you, but put some standards that you would like to see?
Sure.
That
I
would
mean, of
be
course, we
very
don't want to make it overly restrictive. I mean, we don't
No,
want to
but
make
just say
it
the planning commission can deny this based on traffic or
this, that, or the
congestion.
other.
Yes,
or-
absolutely. I think that's a great
Just
suggestion.
some really general things so that when
Factors
you
to
want to
consider.
deny one,
Factors to consider.
you can say,
Because you have to think of future
Sorry,
planning
you don't meet
commissions.
the standard in our opinion.
Yes.
Then we don't have to keep.
But it gives you the ability to say, yes, this does meet the standard, you're approved.
Right.
This makes
Perfect.
sense. So
That would be helpful.
And it'll help future planning commissions.
Well, yeah, then it's not completely arbitrary.
Right.
You have something to base a decision on, even if it's,
Yeah, that's great. I think
I think
that's
that would be great.
very good suggestion.
I should keep Lyle busy for a day or two.
One last clarification question. So I heard the 600-foot length thrown out a couple times, which is fine. And we kind of talked a little bit about this last time. Would that be measured to the beginning of the driveway. Is that to the house is kind of what I'm hearing?
I think that's kind of what we were discussing.
Not to the beginning of the lot, but to the home itself?
Yeah, I just think the consideration is like for the utilities, et cetera, it needs to go to the house, but.
House, right. To the
And I
house.
don't have any, 600 to me, that number doesn't mean anything different than 700. So whatever you folks think is best, we've gone with 600, so that's why I used it, but whatever number is good.
Well, you said the city's been using this for the past 30 years plus, though, right? I mean,
As long as,
yeah, longer than you bet, right? So, all right, okay.
Okay. We'll call to the public.
Last chance.
Do you want, what is his name? What's your name?
Caleb, did you want to say something to us?
We're glad you're here.
Thank you for being here and understanding government. Good job.
Okay, reports. Anybody?
What do we look at, March 8th? Is that right?
Correct. Yep, March 8th. Like I said, we have at least one public hearing for a rezone currently scheduled for that. I don't have any other reports or correspondence myself.
maybe just quickly, so you're aware, the City Council, Mayor, and determined that City Council agendas will close on Thursday at 5 o'clock. So items we review at Planning Commission will be delayed an extra round of meetings. So they're not going to, this subdivision won't show up next Thursday City Council. It'll be the following council meeting.
Okay.
Just so you're aware of that.
It's good
All
to
right.
know. I have a question on a piece of property where we had a huge public hearing. So the one just over the bridge, which they were wanting to get a rezone to the health. Yeah, and now it's up for sale.
Yeah, the owners of the property were highly discouraged with the public comment that they felt people weren't very happy with them there.
Is this Puffer?
No.
This is a rehab
Rehab.
center.
Rehab center.
They had a rock thrown through their window shortly after the hearing, and they just felt very uncomfortable being on site, so they're not sure they're even going to do what they had been doing in the past.
Oh.
And so they're looking at other options for the property.
Yes. So they're just going to sell it, and it's zoned.
Currently, it's an R120, I believe, or an RA, but it's a residential property.
It is written.
So it could go back to being just a residence.
Correct.
Yeah, because they have potential commercial property on their sign.
Yeah, and they've talked to at least myself about that, and they can list it for whatever they want, I guess. Doesn't mean someone could do that, but they think it's got, based on its location, PB, per office type potential or something with it, so they're going to advertise that, but that would have to come through the formal process to see if that actually is viable or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, nonetheless, the rehab item is currently
Gone away,
POA.
huh? Yeah. There was another one I was curious about, but I can't remember it right now. Thank you.
Good.
Move we adjourn.
Second.